Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to interact with a few people around the Remo room, and now I am so excited to tell you about our transactional pro bono panel. Not every lawyer who wants to go out into the world and do good wants to be inside of a courtroom. There are lots of different kinds of pro bono work that don't involve litigation, things like advocacy, small business advice, nonprofit corporate governance, and our panel today is made up of experts in those different fields and even more. Our moderator today is Susie Hoffman. Susie became the first pro bono counsel in the nation in 1988, and she today is still the public service partner at Crowell & Moring. Susie oversees a wide variety of different kinds of pro bono work at her firm, but her personal interest is often in pro bono cases that impact the lives of children. She is active on many different boards, incredibly active in the legal community in DC. She is a past president of the DC Bar and a two-time past president of the Washington Council of Lawyers and a current board member. I would like to invite Susie and our panelists to the screen. And then I will encourage all of you to, again, use the question and answer feature. We will try to get to some of those questions. I think our keynote was so vibrant that we didn't have a lot of time for them, but we're going to try and make sure to get to a few questions during this part of our panel. So seeing everyone here, I'm going to leave the stage and hand the screen over to all of you.
You're on mute, Susie.
The phrase of the decade.
Exactly. You're still on mute.
You're still on mute, Susie. It should be at the bottom of your screen.
If you don't see the mic, hit F11.
I'm wondering, Nancy, can you all override that and unmute Susie?
I don't know that I can do that, but I think what we can do is maybe have each of you.
It's stuck.
I'm going to have each of you maybe introduce yourselves and what you all do, and then Susie, maybe we can ask you to go out of the remote room and come back in, and then we'll get there that way. So maybe, Daryl, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm happy to do so. Great to see everybody. It's such a pleasure to do this panel for the Summer Forum every year for the Washington Council of Lawyers because I get to be back with old friends now. We've been doing this panel for, I want to say, at least 8 years, if not longer. And of course, we are all fantastically experienced folks in the area of transactional and sort of non-litigation work. I'll talk a little bit about sort of how, and I don't know, Nancy, how much we want to get into our bios, but I will just say I am a director. Oh, Susie's back.
So,
I can stop now.
I often joke that this panel could conduct itself. I always had that opportunity today. For some reason, I kept hitting my mic button, but it was stuck. So anyway, welcome everybody. I know that the summer associates who are joining us are interested in making a difference. And one way we can make a difference is
I can't talk to the things that I'm not prepared
through transactional counseling. Is anybody else feedback?
I don't start separating anymore.
So I'd like to welcome our panel, Daryl Maxwell, Jim Joseph, Nicole Austin Hillary, and Walter Smith, who have joined us for, I think, at least the last 10 years and are still going strong, making a difference through non-litigation efforts. If I took the time to introduce all of them and tell you about their many accomplishments, I think it would take a long time. So I am going to start off with my typical question for them to introduce themselves and share with you a little bit about it. So let's start with Daryl Maxwell, because I think he was already launching.
Thank you, Susie. So yeah, I am a director at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. I have the distinct honor of managing one of the only programs that handles transactional pro bono in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We provide free legal assistance to small business owners and to nonprofit organizations, both on a ongoing basis as well for sort of limited scope projects. Particularly, I'll just mention, particularly during this time, sort of in both during the pandemic and certainly as we slowly move out of the pandemic sort of phase, trying to help business owners move back into their spaces, trying to help business owners with difficult decisions, trying to help nonprofit organizations as well on a contract basis, bringing in employees. There's a ton of different types of legal issues that our clients face, and we can use the help of so many volunteers and so many of you who will soon be able to contribute on a pro bono basis. I've been doing this at the Pro Bono Center for the last 12 and a half years, and it's been a fantastic sort of decision, actually moving away from litigation work to this non-litigation transactional work. That's it for me. I know we got a lot to talk about too.
So great, right? And I think one of the themes that you may notice here is that for at least 3 of our 4 panelists, they are what I call recovering litigators. So they've seen both sides, and you'll hear that in their backgrounds. And so next, Walter, tell us about your litigation past and when you saw the light.
Okay, thank you very much. I was as Susie knows, I was a litigator at Hogan Lovells, mostly appellate litigation. And like Susie, I had the honor of being the pro bono partner at that law firm. After that was the Deputy Attorney General for the District of Columbia, in which I did an awful lot of litigation, both for and against the city. But when I came to my current organization, which is called DC Appleseed, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization that's been around in this city for over 20 years, we work primarily not on litigation matters, but on what I would call systemic reform issues. We take on nearly every important issue that's facing the city, same kinds of issues facing nearly every urban center in the country. Education issues, environmental issues, criminal issues, education, housing, health, you name it, we work on it, and we're able to work on it with a very small staff because we have a very large board made up primarily of partners at major law firms in town, all of whom bring themselves and their firms to the table to work on the issues. So it allows us to leverage what is a small staff and work on lots and lots of what I would call systemic reform issues. And DC Appleseed's been around for, I think now 26 years or something like that. So over that period of time, we've built up experience and I'd like to think credibility. The district government knows us, the business community knows us, the other nonprofits know us, the media know us, the foundations know us, and we're known as a constructive partner who, because of our pro bono resources, are able to actually achieve lasting results that benefit residents of the city and the region.
That's great. Nicole, I know people have met you earlier today when you interviewed Judge Holder. I call him Judge Holder because when I knew him, there was a judge. most intimately. So former Attorney General Holder. So I will turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about your trajectory and what you do at Human Rights Watch.
Thank you, Susie. And it's good to see my fellow cohort today. I hope we haven't been doing this 10 years because that makes me feel like I'm older than I am. So I'm going to say it's more like 5 years, and we can run with that. Hello to everyone who's joining us today. You know, for those of you who participated in the earlier conversation that I was privileged to have with a former Attorney General, Eric Holder, I shared at the start of that conversation that I wanted to be a civil and human rights lawyer since I was in junior high school. And that was always my trajectory, weird as that may sound. My friends from high school will joke and say I used to carry a little briefcase in high school. I didn't really, but that's the way they saw me because I was always so determined, and everyone who knew me knew that this is what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I will say this, what I thought a lawyer, a civil and human rights lawyer could do at that time didn't even scratch the surface of what I later learned they could do. I thought that I would become a lawyer and would spend most of my time in a courtroom defending individuals whose rights had been challenged. And then I learned that there's so much more you can do with your law degree and as a lawyer. And in fact, I eventually learned that my skill set was better at doing some of the other things that lawyers can do, and not necessarily, doing the things that lawyers do who spend all of their time in courtrooms. As I like to say, my 8th grade English teacher who inspired me to do this work said I had a big mouth and I should use it for good. And I found that as a litigator, I got to use my big mouth, but not quite as much as I wanted to. And that's really what led me to wanting to do more policy and advocacy work. Because while all of the things you do as a litigator are vitally and utterly important, the briefing, the research, dealing with pleadings, all of those things are vitally important. But I felt like I wanted to be a lawyer in a different way. I wanted to be in the halls of Congress, talking to Congress people about legislation and about policy. I wanted to be in rooms with government officials in the relevant agencies, talking to them about, here's why I think we need to change bail and how it works in our criminal justice system. And so that's what led me into doing work around policy and advocacy. So after spending the beginning part of my career as a litigator, I started out at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, where I was their George N. Lindsay Fellow, and I focused on housing litigation, specifically focusing on public housing litigation. I then moved to a civil rights law firm where I litigated employment and gender discrimination cases. And again, those were amazing ways to have impact, to be able to give voice to people who didn't necessarily have a voice on their own. But then when I had the opportunity to come to the Brennan Center for Justice and run their Washington office, I knew that was my opening to impact legislators and to be in the rooms with policymakers as they were drafting legislation and putting together policy proposals. I knew it would give me an opportunity also to be on the ground with the communities that were going to be most impacted. And for me, that's been one of the most fulfilling and important parts of lawyering. And that's true whether you're a litigator or whether you're doing the kind of work that myself and my colleagues on this panel are doing. The people are at the heart of it, being on the ground with the community, talking to them about what are their needs and what are their wants, and then allowing myself to be used as a vehicle to get that for them and to achieve that for them. That's what brought me to this work. And after I left the Brennan Center for Justice, I came to Human Rights Watch. You know what, Susie, hi, everybody. I'm just going to say somebody is not on mute. And if you're not one of the panelists, we really need you to go on mute. I'm thinking that they're talking and they probably don't hear me. But if you happen to hear me, we need you to go on mute.
No, Nicole, I keep hearing that. I'm going to send Nancy an email. I think they're able to control.
Okay.
They have like a master control. So,
okay, got it.
If I look distracted, it's because I'm
nope, not a problem.
Emailing her.
Not a problem. So let me just wrap up by saying the reason why I came to Human Rights Watch after doing the work I had done at the Lawyers Committee and at my old civil rights law firm and at the Brennan Center was because I felt, like I said to Attorney General Holder at the end of our conversation, that the issues around rights and justice are human and civil rights issues. And they are issues that intersect around the world. And I felt like I wanted to be able to do more with these issues on a larger stage. And I wanted to be able to close the gap that I think really exists still in the United States between issues around human and civil rights. I want people to understand that when we're talking about COVID disparities based on race and gender, or when we're talking about policing in the United States, those are issues that challenge our human rights. And I think it's important for lawyers to be at the center of that work, to be at the center of telling those stories, and to be at the center of uplifting those communities wherever they may sit around those issues. So that's why I do this work in the way that I do it. I feel like it gives me an opportunity to have an impact and to create change in ways that are complementary to, but different to what you get to do as a litigator. And everybody, just let me say this. You have to remember, it takes all of us. It takes a village. It takes a village of lawyers to create real change. It takes the litigators who are going to be in the courtroom, but it also takes the advocates who are going to be on the ground. It takes the lawyers who are the community activists. It takes all of us to bring about the kind of change that we all think is so vitally important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. And now I'm going to turn to Jim, who I think is one of the sole panelist who was not a litigator at some point. He saw the light from the beginning. And
I was a tax litigator for the first 5 years, which is a little different, but I do have the most direct path, I think, or easiest path to understand from my panelists. 32 years ago, coming out of law school, I started as a first-year tax associate at Arnold & Porter, and 32 years later, I'm still at Arnold & Porter. I am now the head of the tax group of our worldwide tax group. And, you know, for me, you know, getting involved in the pro bono work and the non-litigation pro bono work was my way to have the best of both worlds. You know, working at a big law firm, having that big law platform and those resources, but doing the kinds of work that I felt very passionately about. And, you know, you think of a law firm and all the departments you have, from bankruptcy to corporate transactions to IP. You know, we have lawyers in all of those groups who are working in their core areas of expertise doing pro bono work on a constant basis. Because as Nicole says, it not only takes a village, it takes a lot of different skill sets involved. And my initial pro bono work that I did was working with nonprofits and advocacy organizations in making sure that they understood and followed the complex tax rules relating to what a charity can do in terms of lobbying, talking to them about what they can do in terms of voter education without violating the prohibitions on supporting or opposing candidates for office. And now, you know, I do that kind of work for a lot of our sort of big nonprofits on a paid basis. But it is sort of, you have to understand all of those fundamentals, and bringing all those skills to bear has been, I think, certainly one of the most rewarding things that I've gotten to do in my career.
right, well, I think tapping into what Nicole said, it really takes a village to, if we're going to meet the unmet legal needs in our country, and also address some of the pressing social issues that we face. And so we really need, if individuals are not going to be fortunate enough to work with a group like Nicole's or Daryl's or Walter's, we need them to be doing work as Jim is, as a pro bono attorney. So I want each of you, and I'll call you out, to address what kind of pro bono opportunities there are with your organization, how people can get involved. And then for Jim, I'll ask him a little bit to describe some of the pro bono work that he's done and some of that variety. So I'll call out, just to shake things up, call out Nicole first about, are there pro bono opportunities with your organization or with groups that are affiliated with you on the issues that you mentioned?
Sure. Well, Susie, it's really a panoply of opportunities with respect to Human Rights Watch. First of all, I would encourage the students who are with us today, if you are interested in doing work around the intersectionality of race and justice and human rights, to please join us. And I'm speaking specifically with respect to the US division that I oversee, because our division is grounded around issues with respect to racial justice. And we focus on those issues when it comes to policing, immigration, poverty and economic inequality. But we also have other divisions at Human Rights Watch that are not under the auspices of the US division, but who do work in the US based around thematics. So for instance, we have an LGBTQ division, we have a women's rights division. And so those opportunities to serve as interns with our organization are there and are available. But we also could not do the work that we do at Human Rights Watch if there weren't law firms like Jim's, like Arnold and Porter, like Susie's at Kroll, who support the work that we do, who give us pro bono support, who help us with the litigation. Susie is so fabulous. I think anything I call Susie to do, she'll do. Susie even made it possible for my team to do our retreat in San Francisco when we were able to have a retreat right before
pre-pandemic.
pre-pandemic. So this work would not be possible without lawyers at large law firms who are able to set aside time to help us with all of the work that we do. I will also say that we are always working with respect to everything that we do. We collaborate with other organizations. So for instance, the work we do around policing, we work in partnership with the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. We work in collaboration with the Sentencing Project. So there are opportunities to not only do this work within Human Rights Watch, but to be in coalition and in partnership with other major organizations that are also doing this work. So again, back to my comment about it takes a village. So we have the firms like Susie's, like Jim's, who come in and who help and undergird the work that we do. But then we also have those coalitional partners who help us to give voice to these issues. And then we have the opportunities for interns to come in and work with us. And many of our interns eventually do join us at Human Rights Watch to do this work. So those are the various ways that you can get engaged with us and get further engaged in, and as I say, closing that gap that exists between human rights and civil rights and how we uplift that work.
Thank you, Nicole. And Daryl, I almost lost Daryl.
Yeah.
I know that Daryl has pro bono opportunities because I sometimes get the call. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you can get involved with pro bono work and the different kinds of things that you can do with your project?
Sure. Thanks, Susie. So much like as Nicole mentioned, we benefit from great relationships with our law firm partners. Jim, I will also mention that the woman I'm related to by marriage is now in your building, just joined the firm a couple of months ago in the government relations practice. But one of a couple, there are a number of different ways that we get involved, but oftentimes folks who are running nonprofit organizations, as Jim knows, as we all know very well, they usually have found a particular area of expertise, whether it's, an organization that supports breastfeeding mothers or provides a scholarships to students, helps feed the homeless. Their passion and their focus is typically not around corporate governance or tax or real estate. There might be somebody in the organization that has some fluency, but their interest is doing the work and helping our neighbors. Our goal is and how we get folks involved is to take on those challenges to help to build capacity for those organizations. And so how we do that, part of how we do that, we get folks involved both on an ongoing basis with providing free legal assistance, and also at limited scope opportunities where a nonprofit might be able to meet, not in person anymore, but might have an opportunity to meet for a limited scope clinic, an insurance clinic. I know we just had. We during the pandemic, we've been doing small business clinics for entrepreneurs and for nonprofits on a weekly basis. So there's a ton of different opportunities for folks to get involved. We've had less opportunities for law students, but typically when we were in person, we used law students to a great degree, and we're trying to figure out a way to implement that. Again, if any of you are interested in understanding a little bit more about that, I'm happy to answer any questions about it. Or you can go to dcbar.org/pro bono and get more information.
So great. So Jim, I'm going to give you a minute to unmute. And I know you've been involved in a whole variety of pro bono opportunities, and maybe you can talk about a few of them so that our summer associates and students can get a sense of just sort of the range of non-litigation things that you can do.
Right. It is always so hard to pick, but what I usually do is I look at my timesheets over the last couple of weeks and just look at what I've been working on. The first one, I will say that Arnold and Porter has spent over 900 hours on this project since January, and it will be something that I know is close to Nicole's heart. But we were working with a coalition of civil rights organizations on working to get Kristen Clark and Vanita Gupta confirmed to their roles at the Justice Department. And for those who don't know, Kristen Clark was just confirmed as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, the first sort of Black woman to serve in that role, and the first woman to be confirmed in that role. In the last 30 years, someone told me, only 3 Democratic nominees have been confirmed to that job over all of those years. So it's a notoriously difficult job to get confirmed for, and it was horribly nasty and vicious, the fight. But doing background work, responding to some of the sort of falsehoods that came up about these women and their records, doing that kind of research. I mean, these are the kinds of resources that none of the individual civil rights groups could have mustered without the help. And it wasn't just Arnold and Porter. Several other law firms were helping out too. And so it was a massive effort to do this. And so we had people on our team doing research on the records of particular senators who are on the Judiciary Committee to understand what kinds of questions they would be asking. We did hours and hours and hours of mock hearings where one of our associates, me, another partner, and a counsel played senators along with others, sort of asking questions of these folks, doing the background research, reading literally every single thing that these candidates have written or said over their careers of 20 plus years. And believe me, there's a lot. There were a lot. 30,000 tweets in the course of a couple of years for one of them. And so just being able to look at all of that stuff, and then from also looking at, sort of who they worked for, the organizations, what issues they were handling. Going back, had to get access to the papers of a professor at Columbia who Kristen worked for when she was a legal, in law school, because there was some falsehood about something she had done at a conference held in the 2000s when she was in law school. And we were able to get access over a weekend through the Columbia Library to this professor's papers, to a particular box that had a transcript to be able to show that something that one of the senators had said was not true. And so it's that level of engagement. And, we had people from legal assistants to staff attorneys to first-year associates up through, me, who's been at the firm for 32 years working on this. So that was sort of one pro bono project, and we had quite a big team working on it. Another example is close to Daryl's heart. We've been working with a lot of small businesses since COVID happened, doing everything with PPP, with the Paycheck Protection Program, to helping them apply and then also applying for loan forgiveness. It's an incredibly complex set of rules. We've been working with the James Beard Foundation and providing assistance to thousands and thousands of restaurants across the country, doing trainings for them, helping them with their application process, with the loan forgiveness. We are now working with many of those small businesses to understand the rules on evictions and the moratorium on evictions, and what can happen in particular jurisdictions now that many of those moratoriums have been lifted. And then we've been working with employees of these small businesses who got laid off and helping them apply for unemployment and other benefits, which again is remarkably complex. And for people who may not have English as a first language, who might not have great internet coverage to be able to apply, it's very, very difficult. And so, we had, I think, 600 or 700 lawyers at the firm. Out of our 1,000 lawyers, I think, did something as part of one of those PPP projects. And then the final thing, a little smaller scale, but fun and interesting. We are working with Alice Waters, the chef from Chez Panisse. She has a program called the Edible Schoolyard, which she started 25 years ago, which helps urban public schools start vegetable gardens, and then also does education around healthy eating and helps to promote healthy school lunches. And she started this, basically in her kitchen at Chez Panisse. And we are helping put some corporate structure around it. They now have programs in a lot of different school districts. So for liability protection and other purposes, we're putting those programs into single member LLCs, doing then licensing agreements for the name Edible Schoolyard to the different LLCs to make sure we're setting up them properly so that we can protect liability and not pierce the corporate veil if something were to happen during one of the school programs. And so we're giving our corporate lawyers and others the opportunity to bring those skills to working on that project. And we're hoping to get invited to Chez Panisse for dinner as a reward.
A different kind of reward for
Exactly.
And we'd like to come along, Jim.
Okay, well, right, of course.
I think we need to get that on recording here.
Right, it is the 50th anniversary. It started 50 years ago this summer. So that really makes some of us feel old.
And Walter, I know that given your pro bono background at Hogan, that you have utilized pro bono attorneys to the max. So why don't you say a few words about how DC Appleseed has utilized pro bono help? You're muted. Muted. Good. You're not stuck like I was.
DC Appleseed is working with nearly every major law firm in town on at least one project. And many of the projects are very, very long-term. Let me give you a few examples of some of our bigger, longer-term things, and then a couple of the more recent things. We took on the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the city well over 10 years ago at a moment when DC had the worst numbers in the nation. And we brought in pro bono law firms to work with us and medical experts to work with us, helped to develop a plan that Dr. Tony Fauci endorsed as a model for the nation. And now in many ways, our numbers are some of the best in the country. And a lot of this work was done by working with the community, issuing a major report, and then doing what we called annual report cards, on which we put on notice the city, how it was doing and how it was responding. And I'm proud to say the results are such that we have turned the whole situation around here in the District of Columbia. Another example where without pro bono law firms, we couldn't have achieved these kinds of results. One of our longest term projects is addressing what was once the dirtiest river in the nation, the Anacostia River. We helped to start the Department of Energy and Environment here in the city. We got legislation passed that required the development of a plan to clean up the river. And I'm proud to say at the end of last year, a plan was in fact adopted to do all of the things that are required to make the Anacostia River a swimmable, boatable recreation site that could become another model for the nation. More recently, we've been involved in addressing the COVID-19 situation. We were asked to do an analysis of the needs of frontline workers here in the city. We issued a report on that, and then we entered into partnership with, of all people, Amazon. We actually started a new website that could become a clearinghouse where frontline workers could go to learn about available resources to support them, as well as a place where people could go and contribute money so that cash could be directed to some of the frontline workers. We also, I have to give a shout out to Daryl. One of the things that's happened because of this panel, Daryl's organization, the Pro Bono Center and DC Appleseed are now working together on a project to address how well the paid leave program is working here in the District of Columbia. Again, we'll be doing our work by working with pro bono law firms. The other long-term project that I have to mention that is in some ways unique to the District of Columbia, but I never let the opportunity go by to bring it to people's attention. Those of us who live in the District of Columbia don't yet have democracy. We have been working with pro bono firms now for quite a few years, both litigation and non-litigation, either to bring us voting representation in the Congress or to bring us statehood. I'm happy to say we're further along than we've ever been on that issue, but we are still not there. But without the advocacy of our pro bono partners and a number of civil rights organizations who we've worked with on this issue, we wouldn't have been able to get where we are today. I'm really excited about the number of things we are able to address that face the nation's capital because of the wealth of pro bono commitment here in this city. And you asked a minute ago how you get these pro bono law firms. Either I go to the firms, as Susie knows, and Marcia knows, and Arnold and the Porter, or sometimes the firms come to us and say, listen, we would like to work with you on a project. Here's an issue that our lawyers care about. We would like to partner with you to address this issue. So that's another way that we are able to do our work.
Great. Well, thank you all for addressing that question and giving us a sense of how you can contribute through pro bono. It's been quite a year. There have been a number of what I call seismic events. Obviously, pandemic is one of them. I think another, George Floyd's murder, and I think sort of the awakening of the white community to racial injustice. I think, communities of colors have been experiencing and they know about it, but I think there's really been a sea change in a large part of America, hopefully. So my question to you, and I think you've already, Walter, in discussing COVID and Jim, in talking about some of the work that you were doing with small businesses, to talk about how these events have affected the work that you're doing. So how the pandemic and the racial justice issues are affecting your work, what has changed and how people can get involved. And, I think sort of the obvious start is Nicole. I think your work really is all about racial justice, but I'm sure that things have changed as a result of events of the past year.
Susie, as an organization at Human Rights Watch, when COVID hit, we literally changed how the entire organization focuses. And that's not a little thing, because Human Rights Watch, we are in 36 countries. We have over 500 employees. In fact, literally right before COVID hit, we had all just gotten back from our, what you all would think of as an annual meeting. We call it cross-cutting, but we bring everybody together for 1 week for a gathering. And we were in Paris, and we came back. We were all getting back just as COVID hit and everything shut down. And for us, we realized as a human rights organization, we had to change what that meant for our work. So whether you were in the Africa division, whether you were in the Asia division or the Americas division, this was a global pandemic. And we were dealing with issues around healthcare, health disparities, racial disparities, economic disparities. And we were all charged with making sure that our work was centered on how we needed to attack those disparities and how we needed to ensure we were protecting everyone's human rights during the course of this pandemic. And I will tell you that that hasn't changed. We are now, 14 months ahead, and it really continues to undergird the work that we do at Human Rights Watch, and particularly from my program here in the US division. When I first joined Human Rights Watch, our US division had always done work around race, but it was not the core part of the work that we did in the US division. And I will tell you, like you all heard me say, for those of you who were on the earlier discussion with Eric Holder, and like I said to you all earlier, I have a big mouth. And literally when they hired me, I said, okay, when I come here, the whole program needs to be completely focused on race. I said, because this is America, this is the United States rather, and race is the connective tissue that runs between everything that we do. You can't talk about policing and not talk about race in the United States. You cannot talk about immigration and not talk about race. The diaspora is huge when it comes to immigration. You cannot talk about issues around reparations or any of the things that we have been doing without talking about race. And so for us, it then became a doubling down on that commitment and making sure that how we deal with issues around race and equity and poverty, how it showed up in all of our work, making sure that it showed up in the right way and making sure that the work we were doing would be impactful. And that's not going to change, Susie. COVID, thank goodness, things are getting better. We have a vaccine, things are opening up. People are returning to a more active life. But I want to caution people about thinking about this concept of returning to normal. There is a new normal. And really, it's like, Pandora's box has been opened. We can no longer go back to being a nation, or even a world, in fact, where we are not thinking about the other, where we are not thinking about how certain communities are disadvantaged, how the privilege that some of us hold, how that impacts those communities, and what each of our individual responsibilities are to ensure that we are leveling the playing field and bringing about some level of equality and justice. So that's how it's impacted us, Susie. But again, as I said, that has changed us as an organization going forward. And the thing that I have said to people throughout the pandemic and throughout this year of dealing with racial implosions is these are world issues. These are not just issues for the United States, these are world issues. What happened in the United States with George Floyd, what happened in the United States for Breonna Taylor, and what is continuing to happen when the Louisiana State Police troopers video was just released from a few years ago, but showing how they tased and kicked and dragged a Black man that led to his death. This work will continue, and how the lens through which we do this work has changed forever. And that's what's going to continue to undergird and guide our work. And I think probably everybody on this panel will say the same thing. The work that Walter does on AIDS, these are the issues that we've all been talking about. We've been talking about, again, the other and who's disadvantaged and who doesn't have a voice and how we need to change that, not only in this country, but around the world.
Right. Well, I'm speechless, Nicole. I'm always speechless when I listen to you. I mean, I think you captured it so well. And, you know, I think when we look back on this time, you know, these seismic events, we'll see them, you know, there'll be a silver lining because it will have increased our focus on some very important issues and injustices in our society. So, Daryl, I see that you unmiked. If you can talk about, you know, how you, I think you alluded to it a little bit before, how your work address these issues.
You know, I will say, you know, we've had obviously everybody's had to make lots of changes, and a lot of our programming has gone online and making ourselves more available and meeting our clients where they are, particularly our small business clients who had a great deal of needs, as everybody has sort of talked about. But a part of the work has been sort of explaining and reframing and sort of providing an understanding to the firms we work with and to the greater community of how much our work and how much of our client base and how much of our support for our client base has been racial justice serving, because the great percentage, not just, and I'm not just talking about our nonprofit small business clients, our individual and family clients as well, because of where we sit here in Washington, D.C., has been an extremely high percentage of people of color. And I think for, you know, we found a lot of folks awakened to a need to sort of support this sort of justice work. And they haven't necessarily in the past thought of supporting their local pizza place or supporting a local business or nonprofit as racial justice work or supporting racial justice. But you have to think about who those businesses are led by, also who the employees of those businesses are and where these businesses sit, and how supporting a business or a nonprofit in either a disadvantaged community or a community that might soon be facing gentrification, how important it is to make sure that those businesses and organizations are strong. And so, you know, we've certainly tried our best to reach more of the more organizations that we hadn't been reaching before. But yeah, it's the work it's always been a part of our work, but it's certainly something that we've had to crystallize, particularly now during, you know, during the pandemic and as we move out of it. But certainly expanding our programs to reach people where they are in this particular space and understanding that they may have some difficulties with technology. So doing a lot of stuff over the phone, doing a lot more conference calls, you know, because Zoom doesn't work for everybody, or, you know, this great program that we're using may not work for everybody. So trying to be as adaptive as we possibly can.
Walter, I see that.
I
take advantage.
I just want to add just one other thought to what Nicole and Daryl have said. Our organization, I think, given the events of the last year, has become more intentionally focused on doing our work through a racial equity lens. All of the issues that we work on, education, healthcare, workforce development, housing, voting, all of those issues that I mentioned before, they all have a racial element, because in nearly every case, people of color are disproportionately affected and disproportionately in need. And then when you add to that COVID, which obviously has also disproportionately affected people of color, I think to use Daryl's word, it has helped our organization to better crystallize about how to be more intentional in our work, to be more aware of how our work is addressing the racial inequality. And certainly, if there is a city in the country that has a racially disproportionate population by almost every measure, it is the District of Columbia. And the more we acknowledge that and make that part of the focus of our work, I think the more apt we are to be getting some of the better results that we all want.
So just to add something, from a law firm perspective, certainly at Arnold and Porter, a lot of our pro bono work is driven by the attorneys and from the junior associates on up. And we encourage all of the attorneys to bring ideas to our pro bono committee on projects we can work on and what they're interested in. And so a huge percentage of the work I've done in 32 years has been on racial equity and justice issues. But since George Floyd's murder, that really did crystallize, as Walter said. And so we were very purposeful about going out and looking for projects, not only litigation projects, but also non-litigation projects that could help on these issues. One of the things we did, combining two of the elements, is with the small business owners, we ended up developing a partnership with the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, working with small business owners in and around the Bronx, starting with, and the employees who worked at Yankee Stadium, for the food vendors. 90% were people of color. And of the businesses we worked with through the Bronx Chamber of Commerce too, huge percentages. And these were small businesses where they had built up these small businesses from ground zero and were at risk of losing it. And that would have not only impacted them, it would have impacted their families and their communities. So, it has that kind of ripple effect. And this was driven in large part from associates and others who wanted to do more of this kind of work and wanted to make sure that it was measurable, that we weren't talking about it in the abstract, but we could point to particular communities that we were helping.
Right. Other thoughts? I want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to weigh in, because it's important work. And again, hopefully the impact will be long lasting.
Right. One other thing, just to the diversity of this stuff, we actually are representing George Floyd's family, doing my day job, but on a pro bono basis to looking at starting a nonprofit and focusing on some of the racial justice issues that they feel that have grown out of sort of their brother's death in this instance. So again, it's this kind of opportunity that you get because somebody at the firm knew somebody who knew somebody, who was able to say, oh, can we help on this?
Nicole, you unmiked, or you?
Yeah, Susie, I just wanted to unmute to say, I don't know, because you're moderating, so you're busy, but we do have a couple questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you had a chance to see them, because I know it's, when we're in the room, it's easy for us to answer the questions of the summer associates and interns, but I want to make sure you saw those so that we could hopefully get to them.
Okay, so far all I've seen is somebody who said it was difficult to hear, and then Nancy. Are there other ones?
There are. Let me read them to you, Susie, and then you handle them the way you like. The first one is, have any of your firms worked with the new administration to get agencies like CFPB back in the game, either through advocacy, suggested regulation, highlighting issues for them to address? That's question one. Question two is, could you please share ideas or information on how to start relationships with local host organizations for purposes of a fellowship project intended to serve rural communities through satellite offices? And then there's a third, there's a couple. How many of your firms work with the new administration? That one. Oh, so that's it. Those two.
And then there was, third one on how do you balance, if you're a law firm associate, how do you get involved?
Thanks, Jim.
And how do you balance sort of project?
Yeah. And how do you get involved with pro bono? How do you find meaningful projects?
So why don't we start with the first one, at least on my list. Could you please share ideas, information on how to start relationships with local host organizations for purposes of a fellowship project intended to serve rural communities through satellite offices? But I think we could even address it more broadly, is if you want to do a fellowship project, say, for example, an Equal Justice Work Fellowship, how do you approach, for those of you who are at host organizations, potential host organizations, what are your thoughts?
I mean, certainly from my perspective, I have always told young associates that if there is an issue that they're passionate about, or an organization that they know, that they've worked with, that they've volunteered with, or contributed money to over the years, talking to those organizations about help that they need from a pro bono perspective. And then we can, sort of try and build a project about that. We started doing that 20-something years ago with NARAL and the Human Rights Campaign every summer, getting a list of projects from them that we could then use our summer associates to help on, because those were, issues that I was interested in bringing to the firm. So I do think just thinking about what you want and then just asking people. You're offering to help them for free. They usually don't mind you're reaching out to them and asking about it.
Yeah, and Susie, I would add, I echo what Jim said, but I would also say, as someone who did a fellowship straight out of law school, you should be using your career services office. And I hope that your law school has a public interest career office. If they do, you certainly should be utilizing them, because they can tell you exactly how to get in touch with the right person at these various organizations. But be proactive. If there's something you want to do and there's a place where you say, I'd really like to work there and help that organization, just reach out to them. As Jim said, reach out to them and say, this is what I'm interested in. Do you have fellowship opportunities? Might you be able to host me? They will be more than willing to talk to you. But I'd also advise you, my fellowship was a little different. I didn't have one of the fellowships where you wrote a project proposal like EJW. I had a fellowship that was hosted by an organization. It was their own internal fellowship at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, their George N. Lindsay Civil Rights Fellowship. So there are many organizations that have their own internal fellowships. So I would encourage you to do that research also and find out who has those, because that could be the perfect thing for you. I knew of the Lawyers Committee. I knew of the great work that they did. And when and a friend of mine had been their very first George N. Lindsay Fellow. I think I was number 3. So then having, someone who could say to me, hey, this is a great opportunity, that helped as well. And also doing exactly what you're doing today. When you're part of conversations like this, ask these questions, you will get a plethora of advice and information. And then you can kind of lay it all in front of you and figure out what to take and what works for you.
Susie, can I just add, we at DC Appleseed have interns and fellows all the time. And we get them from various different places. Sometimes they contact us directly. Sometimes we hear from universities or law schools. And there are law firms in town, I'm sure you know this, who sponsor fellows. In fact, we've got a fellow right now from a law firm who is going to be working with us for the summer because he picked us out as someone he wanted to work with, and his firm supported him in doing that. So there are lots of different ways to get at it. Just listen to what Nicole said. Be proactive. If that's what you want, go find out what the opportunities are.
Right, and sorry, just unplugging my phone.
Susie, I'm glad me and you still have a landline.
I do have a landline, although it's now unplugged. I've enjoyed getting to know all the spam callers during the day. See if I get off their list. I just want to echo what our other panelists have said about being proactive. The other pitch I want to suggest is that you join the Washington Council of Lawyers. You can join the Washington Council of Lawyers as a student, and the council has great programs on networking, on opportunities, and it also has a great public interest clearinghouse that lists public interest jobs. Actually, when I was looking for a public interest job, every other week I checked the clearinghouse to see what was available. So we didn't have idealist.org and some of the other organizations back then, but the council has great programs, and it's really a great way to use an overused word to network, to get to know other people in the field.
Susie, I just wanted to, if I could just quickly jump in, I just wanted to say, when I'm not doing my day job, I teach a law school class at GW Law School. For all you colonials out there, I'm a graduate from 2003. lot of my students who have been interning or doing an externship at local organizations, they will develop those relationships during the course of the semester, and have, in a couple of cases, have sort of hustled their way, worked with the folks who they were externing with, to then sort of develop that project, develop that externship, or I'm sorry, that fellowship project. So if you don't have a relationship to start, providing them with free labor and then working your way into one is a really good way to do it.
Always good. I'll take another one of the questions. What advice do you have for law firm associates who want to get involved in pro bono? How can they find meaningful projects, balance their new projects with billables, et cetera? So I think this is tailor-made for Tim Joseph.
Well,
in fact, I might accuse Marcia of submitting it. No.
Well, first of all, hopefully your law firm has a Susie Hoffman or a Marcia Tucker, who we have at Arnold and Porter, who are our pro bono coordinators, who help to find projects or help to sort of publicize and help you find other things at the firm. One of the things that I always did when I was an associate was I would look at the conflict checks that would go around the firm. And at least in Arnold and Porter, you could tell which were pro bono and which were billable. And if there was a pro bono project that I was interested in, I would contact the partner who was listed on that and say, do you need help? Or given the kind of work that I do, I'm the former chair of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. People knew that. So they would contact me and say, do you have a project? I'm interested in this kind of work if you have something coming up. So find out who within the firm is doing the sort of work that you're interested in. And then I talk to people about looking for two different types of projects. One is something that will supplement your skills, help you build your skills, but doing it, while you're helping people. I knew I wanted to work with nonprofits, and so I started doing this work of teaching and understanding the lobbying and advocacy rules for nonprofits because I was interested in politics and nonprofits. I did that pro bono, and I really honed my skills in that area. And then the other thing is, what are you passionate about? One of our tax partners is a huge animal lover. All of his pro bono work is for animal welfare organizations, from the local clinic, or shelter, up to representing the ASPCA. We represented pro bono them against their lawsuit against the Helmsley estate, where they were getting cut out of the money. Remember the dog that got left all that money? The residual beneficiary was one of the animal rights groups, and the executors tried to close them out of that. So, we did that kind of work. I know it's litigation, but still, it's, I always say, look for those kinds of things, and just talk to other people at the firm, ask around, because as you can tell from us, we love talking about this, and because it is, at least for a big firm lawyer, it is what makes being a lawyer at a big firm tolerable and livable sometimes, that we have this work. We're not as lucky as some of my colleagues to do it all the time, but it does, it gives you energy to be able to do this, and we love to talk about it.
Other suggestions? I know, Walter, you were at a firm at one point.
Well, I was, and I just to pick up on what Jim said, I think the key, well, there are two keys. One is to do what Nicole said, be proactive. If you have any doubt at all about what the opportunities are or what the policy is of your firm, go up, talk to people. But the other thing is that you need to find out what you are most passionate about. I believe that pro bono work is driven by passion. I have found that what gets people motivated and juiced, whether it's lawyers or other people, is to find for them an issue, a project, a cause that they truly care about and want to commit themselves to. And when I was the pro bono partner at Hogan, and I know Susie knows this, I know Marcia knows this, My job was to find out what it is every lawyer at that firm was passionate about, and make sure that I brought them an opportunity that could drive them and get them excited. Because once you have done that, you have them hooked, and they will produce good work for you, but they will produce great satisfaction for themselves.
Great.
Yeah, Susie, I'm going to be a little cynical here for a quick second. First, I'm going to give you a quick example of how this is back when I was a summer associate eons ago. I was approached in a bathroom. This is probably not the best way to do it, but for the purposes of the story, a partner, I know it's not the way to do it, but a partner asked, "Hey, aren't you one of the summers? I have a project for you." Again, I don't like to speak to anybody in the bathroom. But the project ended up being a Social Security disability case that I worked on throughout the summer, which was a great experience. What I will say is, on the cynical view, if there is, let's say, for example, let's say you wanted to desperately work with Jim Joseph, you find out the pro bono stuff that he's interested in. Now, my hope is that you are also interested in it. But the point is, you want to make sure you want to sidle up. You want to figure out what he's working on, and if there's a place for you. Because if what you're thinking about doing is building your career and developing your skills, it's a great way to. Pro bono is obviously a fantastic way to do it. But doing it with a champion in the firm and somebody who is going to support you while you're doing it is also a really great way to do it. I know when I was in private practice, because I was an antitrust litigator, transactional work was a way for me to sort of increase my skills and to do something a little bit different. But again, if you want to increase your skills, develop your passion. And if you can do that with some support from some heavy hitters in the firm, that's also helpful.